we're coming to you from the finale of the Extreme Entrepreneur Initiative by Lightspeed. I'm being joined now by two partners, Harsha Kumar as well as Akshay Bhushan. Guys, welcome to Startup Central.
Thank you for having us.
We'll begin with this program that you guys started, which you says from the bottom of your hearts and with no plans to invest in the companies. Harsha, it seems very difficult to believe that, especially when you're talking to deal makers.
Yeah. No, I completely get it, and people are often, people often feel or accuse us of having a facade. That's not the case.
Ulterior motive.
An ulterior motive, yes. If only we were that smart. But that's not the case. And it was in fact a passion project for us. It was literally, and if you look at all of our backgrounds, there's no natural reason for all of us to end up becoming investors.
Okay.
We were operators, entrepreneur in Akshay's case. I was working at startups. I was a techie. If you look at everybody on the team, that's their backgrounds. They were founders themselves. And and everybody can count on their journey.
Or a doctor who, Weber hung up his scrubs to
yes,
joined,
exactly.
Yeah.
And so everyone believes that the reason that they had any success in life was because they got exposed to the right people at the right time. And then when we started looking at the world that we're in, which is this investing and startup world, there are factors that play a role that give you that access, right? So today, for example, a lot of founders in Bangalore or NCR have immediate access to investors because that's where investors are located. Founders from IIT have access to information because a lot of successful founders today are IITians. There's a network, you can plug into it. But then there are a bunch of other founders, at least that we came across, who didn't have that access, right? And just sort of drawing from our own experience and what worked for us, we realized that if only we can help, the right people with the right exposure, that we could make a difference in their lives.
I got it, yeah.
Then that was the idea.
So actually, if I could come to you, this is the second edition, I believe, of Extreme Entrepreneurs. Let's talk about this year itself. 10 shortlisted, 6-week-long program, I think it is, 6-week-long crash course, if you want to call it that. What did you find about this year's entrepreneurs? What were some of the big takeaways?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, the type of areas where we've seen entrepreneurs operate in, especially in terms of the current batch. I think the level of innovation has gone up by a step jump. And I think in the past, what you'd see in the Indian ecosystem would be, ideas which are inspired by models that you'd see in either the West or in China. Me Too kind of models, right? But the interesting thing is, if you look at a lot of the companies in the EE batch, actually I can't think of one which would fall in the Me Too category. Like each one is, whether it's companies like OpenApp, innovating on the hardware lock side. I mean, again, with a very strong India angle, whether some of these social networks are focused around, specific demographics, like women. Right, like a lot of these are new ideas which we've not come across, and I think for us it's it's also a learning experience as a fund, right, to sort of work with these entrepreneurs.
Not tempted to invest in any of them?
There's always temptation, but yes, I mean, it's
you're abstaining.
Play by the rules.
It's I mean, again, the focus was never about fundraising. It's all about learning and giving back.
Okay. Yeah. So Harsha, since we have both of you, and I'm going to ask both of you, do you have a checklist for founders and startups, and what is it?
For EE?
No, for yourself when you want to invest, for Lightspeed, for yourself when you want to engage with them, etc. When you're thinking about it.
Yeah, I think everybody has some mental checklist. I think for me, market matters. So if intuitively I feel that this is a startup that is in a large market, then I want to engage. But oftentimes it's the uniqueness of an idea that plays a big role as well, right? And there are times where I wouldn't care about the market, and I just want to talk because I think it's an impactful idea, it's unique, it's different.
Can you share examples with both?
I feel like, I'll give an example from EE, right? I mean, one of the companies today that we were talking, that is in our batch, is called Womania. And they are basically trying to build a network where all these women who have problems in their personal life or professional life, but they don't really have anyone to talk to, because most women end up having smaller social circles, or that family is busy and doesn't engage in talking to them about their problems. So this is a platform that gives them a voice. I think that's impactful. right?
Okay.
And today, I can't imagine how they'll monetize, so I can't size the market. But it's definitely something
Okay.
that I feel passionate about. Yeah.
You have a checklist?
I think there are a few commonalities I look out for. I think one is, how connected is the entrepreneur to that problem which they're solving, right? Because I think the most successful startups are those, they're able to isolate a very specific problem to start with, which they tackle, right? Example, I mean, just to, was one of our companies, ShareChat, which is on the vernacular content space, similar to like some of the women's social networks, which Harsha mentioned. Again, those are like founders who are like super connected around,
Did you discover ShareChat?
Yeah, it was one of the companies which I met very early on.
Yeah.
And then
So
we
what
invested.
grabbed you initially?
I think for me it was interesting. These were like 3 young college kids who had built 30 different products before arriving on ShareChat, and to see that tenacity, I think that was something which like really caught my eye. And I think the second piece was like the level of user insight they had on this new Bharat user. Like I had not come across any team which had that level of insight, and it was also very contrarian insight at that point, right? I don't think anybody would talk about like sort of the next billion user. I mean, it wasn't a very exciting theme for most
Yeah.
investors at the time. These guys were sort of at the forefront and ahead on that wave.
And it's paid dividends.
We'll see. They're
You
doing
made a lot
well.
of money from it. Speaking of money, you must have made a lot of money from Udaan. Are you going to make a lot of money from Udaan, Harsha? That was your discovery, wasn't it?
I wouldn't call it my discovery. Actually, this is just how we operate as a fund. We try to keep in touch with some of the smartest founders. And actually, in this case, Byju is the one who knew one of the founders really well.
Okay.
Incidentally, when they decided to start up, they spoke to Byju about it, and then we all jumped on it.
Okay, so that's how it started. And now there's been another fundraise round, which has been. What about if you guys are comfortable talking about Oyo, because that's another classic example. I think that one might just go in the, I don't know, the business school case studies, as I would imagine.
What about Oyo?
What Oyo now, what they've done with the buyback or the latest fundraise with 10 billion valuation.
Yeah.
Want to say anything about it?
Yeah, we're very excited about it.
Because Ritesh is very young, and someone very young to take such a big bet on, right?
Yeah, he's young and very, very inspiring, and I think it's one of those. It's one again. Sort of back to the question that you asked earlier. When you look at just hospitality as a market, it's a very clear, obviously large market. But then when you sort of pair it up with a founder like that, who at a very young age demonstrates this incredible amount of maturity, then you want to invest in him, even if all he has done is a pilot with 3 hotels.
Correct.
Right? And that was really the story of Oyo for us. And goes back to what we look for when we're investing in a.
And now he's holding a masterclass in extreme entrepreneurs, I believe.
Yeah.
How did that go?
Apparently very well. Very well received, yes.
And just speaking of the good companies, there are also examples where things don't work out well. I won't take from your experience or whatever, but for example, these days we talk a lot about WeWork and how SoftBank, for example, is having to reset. So how do you guys always make sure that you don't have a bust or you don't have one of these WeWork type situations?
It's a tough one.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's ever in your control, really.
I mean, we invest so early, right? And actually, I would say that, potentially some of the very early investors in WeWork, for them, it might still end up being a very successful investment, right? Jury's still out there.
Okay.
But again, like I think for us, if you find the right founder, the right market, I think we still need to make that investment. Some will work, some will not. It's part of the game.
The reality is that there's very little we can control,
Yeah.
and that's why a lot of the pressure is on just your assessment of of just how the founding team will be able to handle tough situations.
Right.
And that's about it, because the reality is that they're on the show. We're just bringing the capital in.
No mentoring, no interference as far as...
The reality is founders are very smart. They know what they're doing. There's only so much we can do. We try to help wherever we can, but it's their show.
Yeah.
There's only so much we can do. So, to answer your question, can you avoid a WeWork situation?
You can't.
Not
It's not
really.
in your control,
Not really.
right?
Nothing is, and even with the founder, right? I mean, how much is really in his control as well beyond
Hmm.
execution, because the reality is that there are market situations also that play a role, right?
I think to add to Harsha's point, I think our role is more of as like the sports analogy as a coach, right? And you know, I think we can add that element. But at the end of the day, the game and the glory
It's up to the
is
players and what they do in
is
the
with
middle.
the player, yeah.
Yeah, what they do in
Yeah.
the middle, right?
Yeah.
That's what it all comes down to.
Yeah.
Can I ask both of you one by one? Do you have a favorite in your portfolio?
That's a dangerous question. Isn't it?
Go for it, Akshay.
I like
you
okay,
should.
no, so I don't. It's not one specific company, but I like this. I mean, this entire theme of this new internet user. We talked about ShareChat, but then you know another company, for example, OK Credit, which you know Harsha's the lead on, right? Which
This is, by the way,
basically-
Akshay is dodging this question because majority of our companies are in this, almost in this sort of new economy sector. So
She's called you out. She's called you out.
good one. No, sorry, kidding. Please go
No,
ahead.
but I think actually that's you know these are the models which actually are going to get big in a
Okay.
market like India, right? Like you know models which are focused on SMEs, right? The everyday Indian, you know this new internet user, right? Like if you look at our portfolio, actually, you know I think we've had the fortune of being in a lot of these
Yeah.
a lot of these
Yeah.
No,
companies.
you've discovered some of the unicorns very early on, which is exactly what your business is, right? Harsha, what about you? Any favorites?
For anybody who's listening, I love all of them. They're all great. No, but I think I'll take a cue from what Akshay said, right? I think for me, I'm generally just excited about both SME and fintech as sectors for India. I think these are both potentially going to create large companies. And we're yet to see some interesting outcomes. So OK Credit is one of my investments that's in the space that I'm quite bullish about. Udaan is another one that I'm quite bullish about. We yet to see fintech play out. We've only seen lending as a model, a real model in India so far.
Where do you see fintech headed? Because you know these days, for all the wrong reasons, lending, credit, NBFCs, fintech, seen in a very bad way. Everybody's painting them with one brush too. So where do you see fintech headed, evolving? You're saying right now it's only lending.
Yeah, it's all green field. I think it's all open right now. There's barely, and when I say it's only lending, I'm basically saying there's barely anything done so far, and that there is room to do more. And you know we've chatted about this before, but I actually feel very good about the regulations in this country and how progressive they are, and I think it's only going to lead to more interesting companies getting formed across sectors, whether it's insurance or wealth. You know, and I think there are some challenges that companies have to overcome. They'll always remain. You know, even if you look offline today, some of the most successful financial services models are the ones that are in the middle of a transaction, right? So whether it is a car loan or a home loan. But that's, if you have to replicate that in the online world, how do you do it, right? So I see some interesting companies come up in collections as well when it comes to financial services. So I think financial services in the fintech world will probably get broken down
Okay.
and will morph into newer business models that you haven't seen before. And Turtle Mint is a great example of that.
Turtle Mint is of course doing phenomenally well and been in the market as well. But you know, when you talk about fintech as well, you're saying the regulations are very good, and I agree with that. Look how much easier it is here actually in the US even to maybe even send money from one account to another account in the same bank. But having said that, are our laws also keeping pace with the fact of data protection, for example? Is that one area where you think we're lagging behind? Because we've also seen a bunch of internet companies actually go to the regulators and say, hey, there's duplication of SIM cards, there's duplication of accounts, and we need to be more proactive on this.
I think the fact that there is less regulation today is actually an opportunity, because reality is that regulations get made when you know when
Something goes really bad.
Well, not bad necessarily, but you know when companies sort of test the limits, right? And so you know, I think in India we're at an early stage in the cycle, and so but you know I expect that over time a lot of these regulations will also come into play.
Are you also noticing a trend towards hyperlocalism, whether it is to do with retail or is to do with delivery or just any other kind of dissemination of information?
Yeah,
Is that the new buzzword?
Actually, that's been a buzzword for
a while now, yeah.
And for the right reasons, because with technology you can do it, you couldn't do it before. One good example of that is hyperlocal news, which as a segment is very interesting. I think if you look at the average Joe, he's less interested in what Trump said in the US and more interested in, I don't know, the price of onion in his district, right? So I think that hyperlocal news matters more to people, and so you're seeing that you can make that happen through mobile as an interface, given that you know a person's location now.
You get content. You tell us your views as well on this.
On hyperlocal, I think it's natural as internet penetration increases. Suddenly, everybody has a device around you, right?
Yeah.
And so I think whether it's companies like Swiggy, which enable on demand of anything from groceries to food today. A lot of these use cases I think that opportunity is just opening up now. I think the interesting thing though about hyperlocal and this whole on-demand economy, what I'm most excited about is I think a lot of these are like employment drivers for the country. Whether it's on the ride-hailing side, which we saw earlier on, whether it's now on the food delivery side, right? Like a lot of these they're empowering this entire new set of users, right? This whole gig economy. I think that's great for the
new
country
buzzword
as well. Yeah, that's the buzzword.
Gig economy is the buzzword.
Or we created that, now it is.
Yeah, now it is. We just created it.
But when you talk about that, obviously because it involves disruption, you also see protests, right? Like we saw that in the case of Uber and Ola, for example, with taxi drivers around the world going on strike. We've seen that for different reasons or whatever right reasons, wrong, etc., with the logout controversy. So this is natural. Now you're seeing with Oyo, for example, and the room aggregators. So this is, of course, a business that you have to go through.
Yeah, I think it takes time for people to adapt to change, and this is.
So they just have to accept it because it's not like technology is going to go anywhere, right?
These are things businesses adapt. There is a phase. There's a little bit of friction on the path to that adapting, but eventually, I think.
So I always say about the startup universe, it's like apni dunya mein, parallel universe. You compare it to the old economy where it's all gloom, doom, slow down blues, no one's buying, festive, not being cheerful, festive season not being cheerful, but it's totally different when you look at the startup universe. So if you can you tell us are most of your LPs, for example, from India, or is a lot of the excitement also coming in from overseas? Like how is it going?
I think with respect to India in general, I think there's a lot of optimism around the world. I think the government is doing a great job to enable that, and also the fact that we are all said and done, there's been a little bit of a slowdown, but we're still amongst the fastest growing economies. This is where you deploy capital, right?
Okay.
And so that happens across.
But are you
sectors.
seeing a startup as an asset class, for example? Are people starting to look at that? Because it can also be, it's a risky game too.
So, I mean, to your point around why are people still very excited versus in the old economy? I think that's, again, it comes down to, especially at the stages we invest at, we're really investing on a team and then sort of forward vision of an idea, right? And so I think I think the new economy starts catching up with the old economy again as businesses scale. And so, like you mentioned, WeWork and some of these examples, right? I think at some point, obviously, metrics matter more than just the idea and the team, and so there's like a little bit of that tension which you see, right? So in the beginning, it's obviously there's a lot of optimism, but of course, as a business gets built, you have to build a business, right?
Yeah.
That's what's important.
So when something like WeWork happens, you guys talk to each other. What happens on your people's side, for example? Give us insights on that. We know what happens in the media world, but what happens?
I don't know why you're digging into what happens inside. That's not going to come out. But
you talk about it, this is what they did, what they couldn't have done, or even what we usually sometimes say in the stock market analogy, resetting of this sector. Does that stuff happen?
I don't. If you look at our investment decisions, I don't think they're necessarily based on, how existing companies are doing. For us, it's fairly simple. Is that company is the entrepreneur solving a problem, a real problem, right? And is that an interesting enough or large enough market for us? Right now, whether WeWork is doing well or not, or whichever company is doing well or not, it doesn't.
I wouldn't say that. I think it definitely does make you think about fundamentals, and it basically makes you ask.
It's a good shake-up for everybody.
It's a good. I would say
it's good, but like it's a shake-up.
I think when you ask us, what is it that we talk about internally, it's about introspection. It's about, hey, are we looking for the right things? Are we, helping our companies navigate this environment well? Are we making sure that they're focusing on the right things? I think that's the discussion, right? The discussion is more introspective.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I don't think it'll change our decision making per se. I think we're fairly first principles investors from that perspective.
And on that note, I'd like to thank both of you for taking the time and being so candid. Could have been more candid, but we're being candid enough right here on Startup Central. Many thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.